Oh my! It is an exciting time to be a Final Fantasy fan right now, particularly a Final Fantasy VII fan. In case you missed it, Square Enix has announced a Final Fantasy VII 25th anniversary celebration broadcast, that thing there, on Thursday the 16th of June, 3 p.m. if you're in the west coast of America, and 11 p.m. if you are in Britain. And if you're in Australia like me, that's going to be 8 a.m. on Friday the 17th of June. Depending on just how well this broadcast goes, coupled with the recent announcement of Final Fantasy XVI coming out next year, dare I say, could we be entering a new golden age of Final Fantasy? Probably not, I'm almost definitely getting ahead of myself. Let's not count those chocobos before they hatch, ha ha ha. I'm of course incredibly excited for this broadcast, and I've got a couple predictions about what it will include. So let's go over them. I will note there may be some spoilers that come up here, some little spoilers. I don't think there's anything too significant that I'm gonna say, but also Final Fantasy VII has been out for 25 years, so if you've somehow managed to avoid spoilers this far, I'm gonna be very impressed. Anyway, let's get into it. Firstly, I'm just gonna point out the quite obvious. It is their 25th anniversary. Surely they have something quite significant to share with us. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone through the effort of making a big deal out of it because they wouldn't want to hype it up for something kind of lackluster. I think this is going to be something quite impressive. And whether that's something surprising or whether that's just a good chunk of Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 that we all know is coming, we'll see. One of the two, maybe both. They've literally asked us to co-stream the broadcast and to please be excited. They must be pretty confident that what they're going to show us is going to cause a strong, positive reaction. At least I hope it's good. Please don't tell us to get excited, Square, and then just give us some special anniversary edition skins for First Soldier or something. On that note, Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 is almost guaranteed to be the star of this event. They've already told us that Remake Part 2 entered full development in July of 2020. Which was nearly 2 years ago. And Katase said that they would love to announce the game in 2022 if possible. And now, halfway through 2022, they're doing this broadcast. It's gotta be Remake Part 2. So Part 2 has already been in full development for nearly 2 years, and Square has previously said, due to the work already done on the first game, we anticipate development of the second game to be more efficient. So hopefully they're already making great progress on Part 2. It's also worth noting that Remake was originally announced at E3 on the 15th of June 2015. Almost exactly 7 years ago. Plus it's been almost exactly a year, about a year and a week, since Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate launched on the PS5. And my final reason for thinking this has gotta be Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 is because the anniversary broadcast was tweeted from the Final Fantasy VII Remake Twitter, and then that was retweeted by the regular Final Fantasy Twitter account. I don't think Square would announce the broadcast on the Final Fantasy VII Remake Twitter unless it had something to do with Final Fantasy VII Remake specifically. Unless part of the announcement is just to say that Part 1 is coming to Xbox. I mean, it could just be because there's no general Final Fantasy VII Twitter, so they just decided to tweet through the most popular Final Fantasy VII related Twitter page, but I don't think so. They said it's only going to be around about 10 minutes, so short and sweet, but that they've packed in a lot of content. So it might just be Remake Part 2 for 10 minutes, but more likely it's probably going to be a short snippet of Remake Part 2, some more information about Ever Crisis, probably something to do with the First Soldier, and maybe, just maybe, a Crisis Core Remaster. So why do I think there's going to be a Crisis Core Remaster? Final Fantasy XVI just got given a summer 2023 release date, around about this time next year. And although this is great news and earlier than a lot of people thought, it's not great news for Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2, because Square isn't going to want to release two major Final Fantasy games so close to each other, particularly because these are probably going to be their highest grossing Final Fantasy games on the PS5. These are their big bucks. They're not going to want to release them within 6 months of each other. And because 16 is coming out in the middle of next year, that pretty much just means 7 Remake Part 2 is not coming out next year. So it's probably going to come out in 2024. But then that's a 4-year gap between Part 1 and Part 2. And that seems like a lot. Like, if there's going to be 4 parts in this remake project, assuming it's going to be about 4 parts, I can't see them doing it in 3, and I can't really see them doing it in 5. That seems like a lot. But if they do 4 parts with 4 years between each, there's going to be a 12-year gap between Part 1 and Part 4, which is just a very long time to get a full Final Fantasy VII Remake experience. And then, they've talked about wanting to remake other games in the series, but if they spend 12 years remaking Final Fantasy VII, are they going to concentrate on any of the other remakes? Like, are we going to see Final Fantasy VI? That'd be a cool remake. Like, I don't want them to rush it. I want them to take their time and do it properly. It's just sort of like, oof, 12 years is a lot, And I'm speculating, but it's a lot. Side note on this, 2023, right? 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 3 equals 7. Perfect time for part 2. Anyway, the reason that this potentially big gap between part 1 and part 2 relates to Crisis Core is that if there's going to be a 4-year plus gap between games, then maybe Square will want to tie us over with something to keep the interest alive in the meantime. Not a mobile game. I mean a full console game. And the obvious answer to this is a Crisis Core Remaster. I mean, they've remastered practically everything else at this point, and if they're going to do a Type 0 remaster, why not a Crisis Core Remaster? It's arguably a much better game. Also, you can't even play Crisis Core on a Vita. You have to play it on the original PSP system, unless you get an emulator. So it's just not accessible. There'd be so many people who've never played Crisis Core, which is a shame because from memory, I mean, it's been about 10 years since I played it, but from memory, it's a very good game. Also, just last month, they added Cisne from Crisis Core into Dissidia Opera Omnia. Omnia Opera? I don't know, I don't play it, but could mean something, could mean nothing, but it could be priming people for a Crisis Core remake, igniting some nostalgia, reawakening some memories. Why stop at a Crisis Core remake? It could be a Final Fantasy VII compilation remake with Crisis Core and Dirge of Cerberus. I remember when they were remastering the Kingdom Hearts games and they were doing them in like 3-packs, right? It was like Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix, Kingdom Hearts Both Play Sleep Final Mix, and then recoded as a movie. And I was thinking, I hope they do this with the 7 compilation, because they could do Crisis Core Remaster, Dirge of Cerberus Remaster, and then maybe they could do some of the anime episodes, like episode Denzel. Or they could adapt Before Crisis into a new anime or some sort of movie, and then do that. Or add Final Fantasy VII G-Bike that we never got here in the West. Maybe. So yeah, that's why I think it should be Crisis Core. I also have just a really wild hope, like a really unreasonable hope that's never going to happen, that Square is going to announce that Remake Part 2 is coming out this year. Now, just to clarify, I do not think this is going to happen. Like, this is like my wildest dream sort of thing, right? Seriously though, what better way to celebrate the 25th anniversary? Oof. A guy can dream, and also I'd rather they take their time and produce a better game than try and rush to get something out. So as much as I want to play all the parts as soon as possible, I also want them to be the best experience possible. And they did such a good job with Part 1, I don't want them to rush Part 2 and then ruin it. Like if the option was, hey, you can have 7 Remake Part 2 this year and it'll go up to Nibelheim, but if you wait until the start of 2024, then it'll go up to City of the Ancients, and it'll be an extra 10 to 15 hours, I'd be like, yeah, let's wait till 2024. Like, I would really love Part 2 to be 40 plus hours. I don't know if that's unreasonable or not, but that's what I'm hoping for. Final thoughts. What are they going to call Remake Part 2? Is it going to be Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2? I remember when 7 Remake was announced, and I'm pretty sure that 7 Remake was the placeholder name for like the time being, but then they just never changed it, which is fine. It's pretty straightforward. It's a remake of Final Fantasy VII, like no messing about. Although it did confuse quite a few people who thought they were getting the full game remade start to finish, and they only got up to the end of Midgard. They were like, where's the rest? I did start to wonder though, when I got to the end of Remake Part 1, and they seemed to be going off on a bit of a different trajectory, and all these theories were coming out, spoilers, about it being a parallel universe and Zack being alive, and maybe that final battle and killing those, whatever they were, the Timekeepers or the Whispered big guys. If the Whispers were keeping us on the original timeline, but now we've defeated those big Whisper guys, are we now free of that original timeline and we're going to go in a different direction with Remake from here? Or do we change the past? Like, is Zack now alive? Or are there now parallel universes that we're going to play between? Or are the parallel universes intersecting with each other? Something weird is going on, right? And I started to wonder, well, maybe they've named Part 1 Remake because that's the only part that's going to truly be a remake. And then from here, they're going to start calling them like, Part 2 will be like reimagined or like revisited. Not revisited, because that's the Matrix, right? Reloaded, you know, like whatever. Or they're going to give them completely different subtitles, but remake is the only one that's going to be called remake because it's the only one that stays close enough to the original game to be called remake. Weird? Yeah, but Square Enix has a habit of coming up with some bloody weird names. Cough cough, Kingdom Hearts 0.2 Birth by Sleep, a Fragmentary Passage. I don't know, I hope they don't do that, but I thought I'd just throw that out there now as an option because they might tell us the title, the subtitle of Remake Part 2, or they may just call it Remake Part 2, which I think may be for the best. I'm getting off track. In summary, I think they're definitely going to show off Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2, and hopefully a good chunk of it. Then maybe a Crisis Core / Dirge of Cerberus remaster, if we're lucky, and then they'll show off some more of Ever Crisis, give us a good long trailer, and then maybe be like, Part 1 of Ever Crisis available right now. And then you can go and download it and it'll get people all excited. And again, it's an anniversary event, so Ever Crisis being pretty much all the Final Fantasy VII games rolled into one little convenient mobile package, that'd be a pretty good anniversary event surprise. Hopefully it's good. It'll be really interesting to see how they adapt Advent Children, for example, into a game. Overall, I'm pretty sure we're gonna get a very strong broadcast. I mean, they want people to co-broadcast. They want people to stream their reactions. So they've got to be pretty damn confident that they're gonna get some good responses. Hope you're right about that, Square. Anyway, what do you think? Put your predictions down in the comments below. Let's have a chat about it. Do you think it's gonna be Remake Part 2? Would you buy a Crisis Core and/or Dirge of Cerberus remaster? Have you played the originals? What are you gonna play? What are you excited for? Do you play The Last Soldier? Because I played it for like 15 minutes and then I just didn't anymore. Let me know down in the comments. If you liked what I said, you can hit the thumbs up, you can click the subscribe and the bell, and I'll see you in my reaction video to the Final Fantasy VII 25th anniversary celebration broadcast. Yeah, see you Friday.